everybody. Thank you and welcome to the October value moment for SAVE Arizona chapter, VM for agencies, understanding program and project needs early. We are joined by our wonderful presenters, Rick Ellis and Renee Hoekstra. Before we get too far into it, please make sure that you've muted yourself. We kind of want to cut down on background noises and all that stuff. We will have time for questions at the end of the presentation. So if you have a pad and paper, just write down those questions now. If not, throw them into the chat and we'll address them at the end. Again, please make sure you're muted. I will go through and mute people if I need to. So fair warning. All right, next slide. So your presenters. First off, we've got Rick Ellis. Rick attended the University of Arizona and graduated with a bachelor's degree in civil engineering in 1991. He then started his career in Seattle, Washington with Washington State Department of Transportation, where he worked for approximately 12 years in a variety of design, construction, project, and office management positions. Rick returned to the desert, Tucson, Arizona, in 2003, where he worked with Pima County Department of Transportation for approximately 15 years in engineering and project delivery, and now currently works with the Pima Association of Governments, PAG, as Director of Transportation Services. So welcome, Rick.
Thank you.
Next. Hey, I didn't know you were from Washington. I am too. We'll connect about that later.
We will definitely have lots to chat about.
Yes. So next up, we've got Renee. Renee is the managing partner of RHA. She is a certified value specialist. Renee has a strong commitment to helping agencies, companies, and individuals understand the benefits of value management, integrating value into the way they do business. This includes helping educate others about the value methodology, which she's doing now. She is the current past president of SAVE International, the Value Society, as well as holding numerous other positions on the SAVE national and local Arizona boards. Her day-to-day life includes providing facilitation and training for partnering, value engineering, and risk analysis workshops for planning, design, and construction projects, as well as internal process improvement studies. Oh, such a mouthful. So welcome, Renee. So glad to have you here.
Thank you.
So yeah, turning it over to you guys. Thank you again so much for doing this presentation for the Arizona chapter. We're really looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, it's kind of a kickoff to that. This whole brainchild kind of came about when Renee and Katie and I were talking, and we were at a recent conference, and kind of saying, well, what would be the next step? Where would we go with this? What would be the possibilities of that? And it was kind of intriguing because that's something that in my career in government, we kind of said there's another level where you can take it from being the formal process and apply the principles, the basics, the foundation, and you could start incorporating this informally and kind of indoctrinate it within an agency or an organization. Knowing that some of the attendees here come from that ownership standpoint or work with agencies and jurisdictions, some of you may be consultants. And so you may be in a role where you can start advocating for this to say, not only do we have the formal methodologies that we want to continue to encourage and use, but we also want to go to another level and incorporate that in the everyday line of business. So you're going to hear that theme as it comes through for both Renee and I, kind of reinforcing that whole notion. So in thinking with that theme, we were kind of looking at it and going, why is this so important? Well, first and foremost, it adds value to your projects, but it can also then be expanded into your programs and your processes. A lot of the everyday stuff that is just considered normal or routine can benefit from many of these principles, guidelines, and the practices that have been developed. Thus, you become a true learning organization. You're now learning on the fly. You're applying this stuff as you go through, as projects are developed, as programs are built. So it's no longer, well, hey, we'll get to this next year when we can kind of go through. No, we do this stuff as a matter of course and how we operate every day. It leaves you with a lot more effective and streamlined processes. A lot of your overall day-to-day routine activities become a lot more efficient, focused, and overly just produce better results overall. You get a better understanding throughout your organization of what your project purpose is, your goals, what you're trying to do, and how you're trying to meet needs. And I'll talk more about that a little bit later. But it really gets the organization focused about what you're really trying to accomplish, which then leads to better overall managing your scope, schedule, and your budget. Your delivery aspects are going to go up insurmountably on that. That becomes a big deal. So getting this incorporated throughout and how you bring this into your organization. So first and foremost on that, you got to be thinking in terms of bullseye. What are you really wanting to aim for? And first and foremost, at least what I found in working with the various organizations I've been part of, is you've got to get your staff understanding, why are we doing this? What are the values and benefits on that? How are we going about this? And what's this going to matter, not just to the organization, but also to the individuals? They got to see how their daily lives, their daily routines, their daily activities get better as well. And then promoting it, supporting it within the organization is, this isn't the flavor of the week. This isn't a side effort you do. We indoctrinate this. We've incorporated this into our daily principles. This is how we just operate as an organization, so that it's no longer got that, oh, I've got to put this down so I can go do this value management or value engineering or value analysis. No, you're always thinking in that mindset, because that's how you produce, deliver, and get the result you're looking for. So the goals that typically all organizations look for, one of these may apply, or all of them maybe apply. You're obviously always aiming for, what are we trying to do as an organization, be it a department or an agency? Maybe it's a big delivery challenge that's been dropped on you, a tax package you just got passed, any one of those type of things. We also want to make sure that we're getting better product out there to the traveling public. So I come from a transportation background. That's been my entire career, as you heard. So how do we get the improvements out there for traveling public, businesses, the motorists that use all this? And also, how do we add more value? We could produce product. I can make improvements out there, but we want to take it to the next level and recognizing it's going to improve things, be it reduction in congestion, improving safety, enhancing and encouraging alternate modes. Where do we go from being, we just produced XYZ results, to we've added value to the overall effort? Coupled with that, we want to reduce impacts. Some of those are tangible in terms of impacts to the environment, businesses, local neighborhoods, but also the intangible ones that often results of change orders, extra costs, consternation that may be felt at the elected official or public level. At the end of the day, we're still trying to be fiscally responsible, learn new possibilities, pursue new opportunities, and take that growth and continue to be better at what we do in delivering our overall product. So the big reasons that we tackle, and these are the ones that I've kind of looked at and embodied throughout the organizations that I've seen and worked for, is first and foremost, you have to be better at planning, designing, developing, constructing, and making the improvements. Making sure that staff understand why we do what we do. You don't want a bunch of robots out there doing the work. You don't want a bunch of folks just doing it because they were told to. They want to have buy-in, support, and that understanding, and going through all these things and the steps you're going to hear talked about help foster that type of environment. You may have special problems that an organization may come up with. Sometimes an organization as a whole will be geared around that. Other times you're going to get that one or two stray situations, assignments, projects that is just so unique. You need a different set of skill set, circumstances, and awareness and opportunity to bring to it. What we also found, a big part of it though, is it also helped a lot of our decision making. We wound up finding that as we focused our efforts, as we got better understanding, we knew who the key people had to be that approved things. We weren't going to 7 or 8 managers. We were going to the 2 or 3 that had key approval authorities. So it really focused their efforts, and they weren't just rubber stamping stuff. They knew what they were getting involved with. Combine with that, with all these understanding better stakeholder needs, so that our solutions better fit with what was going on out there. You'll hear me talk a lot about, as I go through the presentation, about needs versus wants. We knew what people wanted, but did we really ferret out what they really needed? That ties hand in hand with being fiscally responsible, not cost cutting. We never wanted to cut product. We never wanted to cut corners, but we did want to refine it. There was a cultural philosophy we embraced, which was minimum for functionality. We did not want to ever have poor performance, but we didn't want to be extravagant because money saved on one product can go to the next project over and we can build off of that. We can stretch the dollars further than we ever could have. And at the overall end of the day, that meant that the product going out the street was always going to be better, more efficient. We delivered quicker, and the overall end results were going to be a lot more effective for the end users. With Renee, I'll hand it back to you then to get into
Thanks, Rick.
applying it within the organization.
Yeah, Rick is right. And I don't know, some of you who are in the value community may remember many years ago, I put together a paper that I presented at one of our conferences about design, function-based design. And I think we're kind of on some of those levels right now where we're trying to get people to just start thinking. And I love my business partner, Pat Miller. She always loves to talk about, drinking the Kool-Aid, which means when people really get focused and really understand the tools of the value methodology, there are so many ways to use it. And so that's why when we talk about informal versus formal, that informal part where Rick is really talking about trying to get it into the way you think. But in order for us to get it into our organizations, and I've had a number of conversations with public organizations, is about trying to educate your staff about ways to use VM in delivering projects and programs. And you need to be thinking about, well, geez, if I can understand the tools and I can understand how to use them, then we can use them differently. And those are some of the things that we're going to kind of talk about today. So Rick had already mentioned about stakeholder issues, and I will bring those up a little later when we start talking about performance. But stakeholder issues, when we have organizations, and because we're kind of talking about transportation, but it could be other types of construction projects, but we sometimes have other agencies that are involved or even other departments that become stakeholders, and we really need to engage them and make sure that we understand what their needs are, and the value process can help us do that. We may be looking at new materials. It's always been a really tough thing to incorporate brand new materials, manufacturing items into an agency. They have a big, long, drawn out process, but they could actually be using the value methodology to look at how we do that. New approaches. Again, products kind of go in with materials. We did this with Caltrans, and we were trying to figure out how we could better deliver the right of way, and we were looking at new applications of literally trying to reduce their weeds. But these were new approaches, new products that we wanted to look at. We've done this with, if those of you remember, building bridges. We've gotten into ABC, the new alternative, bridge concepts, and delivering these things faster. Really great opportunity to do that. You may have a very specific design challenge. You don't necessarily need to do a formal process on the whole project, but maybe it makes sense on a specific design challenge to actually say, okay, let's stop and let's talk about function. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Environmental issues, fabulous opportunity. All of us know that when we go through the environmental process, we have to come up with alternatives. This is a great tool to use in alternatives analysis. And we base it on understanding function. And again, if we can start to get team members to start thinking in function, they can start actually indoctrinating this into their language and the way that they do business. Customer complaints. Sometimes we have a tendency to, we keep hearing the same thing over and over again. We think we fixed it, which means we fixed a symptom of the problem. So maybe we could stand back and look at this differently and figure out what is it that we're not hearing, what is it that we're not seeing, and even managing risk. There's a really great opportunity. All of us that actually lead formal workshops know that we're engaging risk as a topic for discussion, because during the creativity and brainstorming, we have an opportunity to look at how can we reduce those risks. We can also use this for process improvements. We've done numerous process improvements. I know several of you have that are on this about, how can we look at how we do business today and how can we use the value methodology? Rick had mentioned, project delivery just from the standpoint of pieces and parts. We've literally talked about from cradle to grave how can we improve our processes? We did this for McDOT, where we really talked about where were we struggling? Why was it taking us so long to deliver a project? So we were able to use that, how we were getting rid of right of way. How do we manage our utilities, our underground utilities, because they are such a huge problem on all of our projects. We've used the value methodology to reorganize departments. We took 3 departments and moved them into a single department. And in order to do that, it was important for us to understand how each of the departments functioned. You know, what were their roles? What were their responsibilities? And be able to actually figure out then how can we apply those functions. Again, we talked about environmental. We talked briefly about alternatives analysis in the environmental process. We've also used it for public outreach. It is a great communication tool to help the public communicate to us what their expectations are. And when you can talk about it in the terms of function, it helps them better understand and gets us from our needs and our wants and understanding the impacts of both of those. And then we also use it. We have a client who does uses the value methodology at constructability, which means it's much later on in the process. It's sitting at about 60 to 70%. And it gives us an opportunity. And here's where we use function analysis a little differently. The project is all the way almost to the point where all they're going to do is the final design pieces from 70 to 100%. But we want to check and see if there's anything out there that maybe we've missed. And one of the things that we use function analysis for is literally to confirm scope. Did we accomplish all of the functions of the project in the current design? So it really gives us an opportunity to, once again, even though we're beyond where we want to talk about how else I might perform the function, now we're using it as an opportunity to confirm that we've met the functions that we wanted to within this project. So it's a really great tool from a communication standpoint, and staff needs to understand that. So we have to be able to educate them and we have to support them about using VM. And I think one of my biggest challenges that I've seen, and it's not just the value methodology, it's actually been other processes that I use. So partnering, risk analysis, is they throw something at staff and say, okay, read this and now I want you to apply it. And that's not really educating and supporting your staff. It doesn't really help them accomplish what they need to accomplish, but it is absolutely important if you want them to absolutely to embrace these challenges or these changes. Because here's the challenge that I've run into with staff. We come up with a new flavor of the month, and management gets all excited about it, and all that staff sees is, okay, now there's more work for me to do, and I still have this other pile of work sitting over here on the side. So it's really important to understand, if we're going to do this and we're going to embrace this, is let's look at updating what some of these approaches organizationally will be, so that they have the tools that they can actually then perform, even if it's informally, but be able to start thinking differently. So this might be project development, project management plans, PDPMs or PMPs. They need to understand, and for those of you who work with project managers who are even gone through PMI, value management is in there, but it's a really small piece, and it's more related to a formal approach and not necessarily how SAVE might embrace it as much. But we really have to look at, we've got to get value thinking into the project at the beginning. We've had these conversations with other owners, Washington DOT being one of them. If we don't put it into our project timeline, if you force a project manager to stop and say, okay, wait, now I need to do a VE, and they didn't have it in their original schedules, they're going to fight you. They're not going to want to do it because it's going to have a negative impact on their project. We have to look at policies and requirements. I know there's only a couple of agencies out there who actually have formal policies. The City of New York, back, I believe it was in 1982, they actually set a brand new policy and requirement that every project has to go through OMB, their Office of Management and Budget, to determine if there's a value engineering workshop that needs to be accomplished on these projects. So we have to think about, do we need to establish policies and requirements so that we're thinking about how we engage and we incorporate versus how we stop and start over? Adopting the VM tools, techniques, and principles. And I know Rick has been really, really positive about this. Rick and I have known each other for quite a few years. And he knows that I continually uh, talk about, the tools, techniques, and principles of the methodology. And it really is trying to get him. And I'm really proud that he continues to think about these, that I did have some sort of impact on him
It's sunk
that
in.
has helped him in what you do. And then indoctrinating into the agency and or department as a normal way of doing business is not the thing that we throw in at the last minute, or not the thing that we say, oh, by the way, all of a sudden, if you think about for Federal Highway Administration, for those of us who do transportation, they have their thresholds. And I've had several times where a project was under the threshold, and then all of a sudden they got 40%, 60% of the design, and they went, uh-oh, we're now over the threshold. Everybody stop. We need to do a value engineering workshop. But when you're at 60%, there's not a lot we get to be able to do, because what we're doing is we would literally create a problem of having to go back and do redesign. Now you're impacting the schedule, might impact the budget. So it's just really something that we need to indoctrinate, and we need to make them think about what they need to be doing. And really, sometimes it's just about getting them to understand versus misconceptions, hearsay, and my favorite are the rumors. And that goes back to what Rick mentioned, that the value management isn't about cost cutting. Otherwise, why wouldn't we just call it a cost reduction workshop? We call it value management and value engineering because it's about value, not just taking away. So it's important that we educate and we train. So what does value mean? You have to define it. I can give you some ideas. Stakeholder satisfaction. If you're working with other departments, other agencies, this isn't going to be the only time that you ever work with these before, especially as an owner and even as a consultant. Our design consultants work with some of the same stakeholders all the time. And even as a value professional, I've been involved on projects where I've had some of the same stakeholders. And so it's a really great opportunity to open up lines of communication, engage them. It's also, as Rick had mentioned, a training opportunity. So don't be afraid to get your people involved. But you might want to be looking at, how do we define value? And a lot of us define value as it relates to performance. How must this project perform, or how must this program perform? And so here's some ideas of what some of those might look like. And there may be others, and especially if, again, we're focused on design and construction projects, but when you get into the manufacturing world, you're going to be looking at completely different things than what you might see here. But again, help identify what your key performance attributes are within your agency, and you can make them standard. Caltrans has a standard set of performance measures that they use for every one of their projects. They have standard ones, and then they have option ones that can be addressed. So it's, again, an opportunity to define value. So why is performance important? And it's really interesting. When we started to apply performance in our workshops and the things we did, we found that it provided an unbelievable tool for communication and gaining understanding. And if we look at performance as the definition of how we look at value, the things that we can do is use it to help build consensus among our stakeholders. We often have conflicting views. I've got one agency who wants one thing, another agency that wants another, and the owner who says, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. Well, we're going to need them later on in the project. We're going to need to get together. So again, let's build consensus. It's also a better understanding of our project's goals and objectives as they relate to purpose and need. When we think about purpose and need, I actually did a workshop on using the value methodology on helping teams identify and define purpose and need, because we were struggling with it. And so this is an opportunity to really understand. And if you think about, if you swap it and its need and purpose, it really is, for those of you who are in the value world, it's our higher order function and our basic function. How can we move forward on a project if we don't understand those? What happens if we do is our projects end up being over budget and we're beyond our schedule. It also helps us develop a baseline understanding of how we're going to meet the performance goals and objectives. So if I'm looking at how does our baseline project, how does our project today meet those performance attributes? And then if we start looking at how else I might do this differently, what's the difference in how these new ideas or these new opportunities impact performance? And then you can compare the two baseline. So it gives us a really great understanding. It also develops a better understanding, like I just said, on the concepts effect. But then that relationship, remember how we always, well, some of you may remember, some of you, this might be new to you. The true definition is performance function over resources. Well, if you look at that, resources is our cost. Value isn't defined as cost cutting. We have to look at how must this project perform, how must it function, and what are the cost impacts? And then using it to use as the basis for selecting the best project, design concept, approach, idea, whatever it may be. So what we want to look at is other reasons that we want to focus on function, performance function, that it's a better opportunity to define our essential project elements. What needs to be in, what needs to be out, or as Rick put it, what are our needs versus our wants? Because we need to remember that with function usually comes cost. So we need to be able to define what those actual ones are. And so if we can get people thinking of what must this project do, not how I'm going to do it, but what must it do, we can have a better understanding and conversation. We want to make sure that if you're using, whether it's informal or formal, it's got to be early in the project. It's got to be at that development of purpose and need. Also helping us define our key parameters, scope, schedule, and budget. Why wouldn't we do that? If we wait until we're already, 30% into the project, we've missed a really great opportunity. And again, as Rick, showed in his, we want to help avoid those costly late changes and redesign efforts that then impact the project.
Hey, hey, get him out of my water. Hey, get my water.
Somebody needs to mute themselves. Thanks, Katie. And here I'm going to turn it over to Rick, because I think one of the other really key important parts of this is that team approach.
And that's exactly correct. And folks kind of knowing, intuitively know all that and understand that. But one of the biggest things that we had to work at on the jurisdictional or the agency, the organizational level was, okay, everybody understands the benefits. They could see that. A lot of the things that Renee had outlined and summarized, great, that makes sense. But folks are going to have a role in it. This is a people effort. At the end of the day, it's all going to live and die based on how well we use this and what we do. So we really had to take the notion and take team mentality and expand that. And everybody's familiar with project teams. They've all worked on that. They've been part of that. We had to expand that and say, we're not going to think just project teams. We're going to think organizational teams, so that all representatives out of our traffic group, our construction group, our survey team, field offices, drainage, environmental, all of them have a role in making sure that the organization. So taking this project level thinking that's got all those disciplines and saying we have that organizationally as well. It's not just the simple act of, well, we all got to learn to talk to one another. Folks, it's way, way, way above and beyond that. It's about how the team, and you go to the next slide, it's the commitment of all of them to participate and engage. So we had to take it and say, it's not a simple matter of you believing the benefits. Got it. We've got that. It's easy. We've done that. Now, what are you going to do about that? How do you offer value? What's your role going to be? It's being prepared to jump in there and knowing what your contributions are going to be, where you have to go research something, how you're going to be helping big projects, how you're going to be helping small projects, how you're going to be helping me as a manager go forth and deliver and identify the next round of priorities. How do we get them scoped properly so that we do have the right focus on purpose and need things? Recognizing the multidiscipline thing. And this was one of the It's intuitive, but it also meant, well, you got to make more phone calls. You're making more phone calls, you're bringing them to the table, but backtracking is almost eliminated. That was the number one thing that a lot of folks really resonated with is we're not taking steps back. Coupled that with, we could also break through the personal institutional barriers. Everybody runs into it. Well, we don't want to have Mary there. Mary always brings bad news. No, Mary doesn't bring bad news. Mary's profession is regulated way, way, way more than anybody else. Mary's helping us understand that. Once we could break through, engage, she's contributing, we're doing a better job of listening, we realize, wow, there are 75 codes, policies, and regulations that govern how Mary interacts with our efforts. We better be a lot more cognizant and respectful of that. And so those learning type of things happen. And then first and foremost, people wanted to work together. I've always said one of the great successes of a project is meet needs, happy people. Happy people meaning, will your team members rally around you again? Will they come back and say, I got you on the next one too? So we're learning something along the way, but we're also saying, you know what? This wasn't a one-shot thing. I want to do it again and again and again. And now we're a collective, collaborative, working together organization, all those intangibles that everybody always tries to describe and say we want to achieve. Now you're actually living it, breathing it, and embodying it.
And it's interesting, Rick, because we have had brand new team members from an agency who have not had a chance to really go through the process. And that's exactly what they've said. Hey, if you've got another one coming up, count me in. This was great. It was enjoyable. I learned something. And I think that is something that I think we lose sight of, because when they're first asked to be on a team, it's like, oh, but I've got so much to do. I don't have time. But then and this isn't a formal process, when they've had a chance to actually be in a workshop, they've really, really enjoyed it. And that's what we want them to do. We want them to drink the Kool-Aid.
We didn't want people going back and going, well, I worked on the goal project. Now I got to go back to business as usual. No,
Right.
This is business as usual. The next 23 things you're going to do are going to look, taste, and feel. Different amounts, different complexities, as Renee talked about, but the cultural philosophy, you're going to still see that.
Right. So I want to slip in very briefly, because I don't want to go through the whole job plan. That's not what we're here to talk about today. But those of you who may not have a lot of information or experience with the VM job plan, there is a formal process. And Save International, us being the Arizona chapter, all of us who are certified value specialists who lead it, it's important to realize that there is a formal workshop. But what is also important with that workshop is making sure that it's scheduled at the right time versus what I mentioned earlier, when we got to 60% and realized we were over the threshold and somebody had to insert themselves and do a workshop and nobody really wanted to do it. Or if we're using it to check it off the box because I'm supposed to do it, it's as if we can indoctrinate it, if we can get people thinking about how important it is to engage early, then it won't be just a one-time shot. But there are still going to be those projects where they can benefit tremendously from that formal workshop. But you have to schedule adequate time to meet each of the steps because it is critical. I just got an email from someone the other day who said, hey, I want to do this, but I want to do it in 2 days. And I said, no. I said, based on what the requirements are, we need to go through the full process. You can't do it in 2 days. And he goes, well, okay, propose to me then what it is I need. We also need to make sure that we have team members that they have time to do their other job as well. We rely on our agencies. There are several agencies where they provide all of the team members themselves. We have others where we provide team members, and then there's other projects where we do a combination of those. We still have to remember that our team members have other jobs. And so it's important to realize that although I've got them, that they're also probably thinking about some of the other things that are piling up while they're here trying to work with us. We need a commitment by those team members, though, that are there is to stay engaged in the whole study so that we make sure that they're a key part of our success. That's what's really important here, is that engagement. Coming in and going out, we've already had some struggles with individuals who have done that, and you can't backtrack. We want to keep moving forward. So again, that commitment to be involved. We also need to understand that each study is unique. And that uniqueness, and when we talk about uniqueness, it might be complexity, it might even have a dollar threshold, but that's what dictates the length of the study. How long do we need to do an adequate amount of work? And the more prepared we are, the better the study is. And I want to remind everybody, and that goes back to including the team. What we have always said is a quality team equals quality results. So it's important for us to make sure. So if we talk about the typical study duration, just to remember that it's important that if we can't have enough time pre-study to get ready for it, understand that we're all on the same page during information. Make sure that we do function analysis so that we really truly start thinking in function. What must this project do? And then time for creativity. I mean, if we're here because we want new ideas and opportunities, we've got to have time to be creative. And then here's one of my big lessons learned over the last 20 years. We have all of these ideas and we blow through the evaluation process too quickly. So we don't really spend enough time evaluating them against our goals, against our constraints, against our performance measures to make sure that we select all ideas that we can move forward. There's too many times that team members have been started into writing up an idea. They get partway in and go, you know what, I've realized this isn't really going to work. And that happens all the time. But what I was noticing in those that we didn't spend adequate time in evaluation, it happened more often than if we just spent more time. So, and then of course, if we have those ideas, if development, how do we know what these new ideas are about if we don't have time to develop them, cost them, do some drawings? So what I want people to realize is that I know it's easy and we want to say, yeah, let's do a short one. You know, I can do it in a day. I can do it in 2 days. But let's make sure we understand what the outcomes and expectations of those are, because it's important that the value process doesn't get a negative connotation because they didn't get what they expected because we didn't have the right conversations about timing. So that, you know, the teamwork is important, but it's the results that they're looking for. And these are alternatives that can be implemented. And again, it's focusing on improving value. So you have to explain to them. We can use them to help develop, as we talked about early in the project, help develop scope, schedule, and budget, purpose and need. So you got different project phases, different design phases, specific problems and opportunities, which we already talked about. But you want to look at what you do and how you do them, Rick. And I know you've had conversations about this with me, you know, about just getting your people to think differently at the early onset. So, Rick, I think I'm going to turn this over to you.
So getting folks to buy into this, and like I said, some of you represent jurisdictions, agencies, owners, others are in a consultant role, so you can still advocate for this, but you can help folks understand that why, you know, the barriers to what they would see, what would stop them from wanting to do this in there. And obviously there's the pride aspect of it. You know, nobody's going to come in and tell me I've been doing this for 30 years. Great, but we're helping you expand that there's other times. There's the time factor of, you know, how much time do I have to do this? Don't you understand I'm already overloaded? And helping people understand that we're shifting the time. When you're spending a lot of time undoing, reworking, redesigning, redeveloping, we can offset that more effectively and productively. And, you know, just some folks don't want to be flexible. They don't want to bend around all this stuff. They don't want to have to adjust and adapt what they've learned as a protocol that works for them. So there's always these barriers that we're working through. There's oftentimes, hey, I don't want to be the wild one out there doing this alone. You know, if my boss is going to come back and yell at me for wasting time on this VE thing, and does the organization even support this, or are you just giving me some, you know, guidance for the day type of thing? So there's always those things out there that kind of get in the way and say, you know what, here's the reasons why I don't want to do it with it. You can go to the next one. So conversely, then the challenge I had as a manager and within the organization, it wasn't just myself because I had other partners that worked with Renee. We'd gone through several projects together and kind of the light clicked on and said, we can do this. Why are we coming up project after project after project and the same things? You know what? There's got to be something there we can work with. So how do you get staff motivated, excited, and thinking about this with them? So we found a few ways on this. First and foremost is we're telling them you can do this overall. This isn't a project one-off. You keep hearing me repeat that phrase over there, but this is going to be something that we're going to look at doing over and over again because we knew it was successful one time. Why can't we repeat it? What's stopping us from saying we could do this again? We can do a second time and then a third time and realize, wow, once we get a few of those going, the ripple effect is going to be amazing in there. The other part, and Renee's hit upon this, you've heard me talk more about it, it's really changing at how we looked at something. And for us within the organization, particularly transportation, it was no longer, I have a solution I have got to put out there. I've got to develop the design. I got to go build it. I have a solution. See, it's here. Folks, what are we trying to solve? You heard her use the phrase purpose and need, and she hit right on one of the key things. As simple as it sounds, we started reversing that to go need and purpose. What's broken? What am I doing out there? What is my deficiency at? Where am I not performing? Where are my shortcomings? Whatever made sense to folks to say, what's happening today that is unacceptable? So let's start with, do we have a good grasp on what simply we're looking at to go, is that broken? Is it not performing? And then how do we apply the principles, techniques to come up with the best solution? That simple reversal won us more battles, debates, and arguments over, well, wait a second, here's the best solution. Well, that may not work for what we're trying to do, or that's overkill. You know, to put it in tangible examples, we oftentimes had folks wanting 8-foot wide, 10-foot wide sidewalk or pedestrian facilities when we only had occasional users. Standard dimensions would work. Or we could use now multi-use pathways in lieu of just sidewalk because we had different types of users out there on PEDs, rollerblades, skateboards, those type of things. More conducive use for it. So simple discussions about that helped us shape our look at what our traditional solutions were. As a result, our overall processes got better. Things that we were just doing routine-wise. And that was a big thing with folks is, okay, I do everyday stuff, and here's the aggravation. This is what we had to listen to our staff about. You know, it'd be great if we eliminated X. It's not that I don't buy the products. It's not that I don't want to cut costs. It's not that I don't want to reduce this time frame. I'm just sick and tired of going through these 12 steps over and over again. You know, that's a legit complaint. So how can we take that down to 3 or 4 that add value? Where can we make that streamlined so now it's not a tedious effort, it's a value-added effort? One more thing, and kind of along those same lines, what we also thought about is we also had to find tangible ways to explain this that are not your traditional, hey, we saved XYZ millions of dollars, or we shaved 6 months off. That's always great. You want the home run all the time. But we also wanted to make sure we were explaining to folks about there that it's going to be above that. It's, hey, we got the right product in there. We got the right solutions in. We're going forward without backtracking. That was one of our things that we were doing is, and this kills every project, is change. We were changing stuff way late in the game. So trying to make sure we had it right from the get-go. I told my entire teams, and I've preached this left, right, and sideways, V sometimes stands for validation. You've got the right project. You've done the right things. You've got nothing you can change on that. Designers, managers, staff members, the amount of pride they would feel of, wait a second, you're not just going to change it. I'm not going to change it if you've got it nailed. There's no reason to. Now we can verify that to elected officials, public officials, our bosses, executives.
That's true, Rick. So validation is a form of value. So I would agree with you. We've had projects where we actually didn't do a whole lot except for maybe in some schedule because what we validated is it was the right approach.
And there is huge benefit to that in their eyes that, wait a sec, change didn't always change. This is another thing I had to incorporate as a real principle to them is, you know, change and improvement are different things. There were
Right.
people that, are you resistant to change? You absolutely better believe I am. If you're just changing it to do something different, not so much. Are we adding value? Are we improving it? Think differently on that. Just that simple notion of different didn't always mean it was better. So how can we make it better?
Right.
And exactly that. If we couldn't make it better, then folks, you did it. You nailed it. Home run. Pick your cliche, pick your analogy on that. So what were we finding that we had to utilize in getting them engaged and bored on all this stuff is, first and foremost, you got to get in the game. You've got to be in there with the opportunities. So we had several projects we had done this on, large, complex, small, medium, it didn't matter. We are trying to expand our staff on that, make sure different PMs went through it, make sure our different disciplines, traffic folks, environmental folks, structural people, anybody that we knew could be involved, give them an exposure to it. Let them see firsthand what that looks like. And then when we repeat it again and say, remember when? Yes, I do remember when. Good, we're going to do it here. Well, Rick, where's the facilitator? We're doing that. Folks, it's the same principles, it's the same basics. What you learned from Renee, you're going to do here the same exact way, just a different face, different name. Oh, okay. So the techniques were going to be consistent on that. We had to show them that. Goes back to, and as you've heard us talking about, it's making it a way of doing business. Guys, we're going to we're going to work on this because we got the next project coming up. Isn't that just a small intersection job? It is. You understand it. Why are we doing it? Because the value still is there and the benefit is still going to be there. We oftentimes wanted to try and have introductory programs, brown bag lunches, whatever other methods we're going to do. Instances like this. Can you learn more about it? Can you go to something? Conferences we go to between APWA and ACEC. We have multiple opportunities in there. Renee and Katie have been available for either just come by the booth and talk to us, or we'll actually do advanced sessions as part of the overall conference. So any opportunity where we could plug folks in with that was going to be beneficial on that. And then obviously you have the main organizational opportunities through their conferences, exercises, chapter involvement. We wanted to make sure folks understood this is not that, hey, you do this once in a while, you do this here. It's prevalent throughout the industry. It's just part of how we all operate now. I often joke that the worst thing we could have is a policy saying you have to do this. Because the flip side to that is, I don't have a policy because they all want to do it. So that was how we tried to go there.
If we could only get there.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's always the goal on that is. So we knew we wanted to be champions, and I won't go into the details on this because everybody knows you want people campaigning for this. You want them to explain the benefits. You want them to be the cheerleaders for it. I didn't, and myself and my counterparts, the other division managers, we recognize, we bought into it because it was driving us crazy at some of the things we were getting stuck doing. B, we have the hands-on familiarity and the exposure to the most staff. Yes, our executives need to buy into it, but they're not going to be the ones that deal with the 15, 20, 30, 40 people in a division. So I really advocate for this, that your biggest champions, your bang for the buck is going to come from your division or your sectional or your organization, that mid-manager level where they've got access to the majority of the staff in some way or form or another on a regular basis. They can help advocate for it. They can help explain it. They can help offset a misconception. Well, I was in this project and this came up and nobody listened to me. Well, were you properly prepared? Did you tackle it this way? Were you getting sideways with the function of that? Were you properly analyzed? Okay, I see what the difference was. So those are probably your core area where if you can get that mid-management staff, because then it's kind of in that middle, goes down into the teams that work on and goes up to explain, hey, we're doing this and here's the value it's adding. This is why the bosses are going to go look good here in about the next hour. So that was always the biggest thing. And then highlighting the results. Folks need to see it. It's not going and getting a council presentation. It's showing it to the staff members going, hey guys, remember the project you were working on that you shaved a few months off? I just slid it into the program because we saved money on it. And now I've got an opportunity to go deliver it. Folks want to see results. And oftentimes they just want to see results for their efforts.
So thanks, Rick. And just to kind of close it out today, and thank you all for your participation. all we're really trying to do, and as Rick said, a couple of you are owners, a lot of you are like I am, and we're consultants, but we spend a lot of time with our clients. And I think the more we can try to help them figure out how to better deliver, instead of it just being a focus on, oh, we can help that project, or, I can, facilitate that workshop, is how can we continue to talk to them about getting them to think differently and getting them to embrace what it is that the value methodology has to offer. And it's not just about doing the workshop. I have always been a believer, the more people and the more organizations that embrace the value methodology, eventually there'll be more work out there. So that really isn't my focus. My focus really is, for those of you remember my presidency, spreading the word, and the word is VM. That's my goal, and that has been my goal and continues to be my goal whenever we get a chance. So it's just, the key is to help them to learn the principles, foundation, and fundamentals of the value methodology. I have had projects, if you look down, the third bullet, sometimes you can use one or more of the formal job plan phases. I was doing a partnering session at the very beginning of a design development. We were struggling with a border facility, and it was with the federal agency, the local agencies, and our state transportation agency. And literally they were fighting over who was going to get to do what, and what was supposed to be included. And no, we don't want to include your stuff. I stopped in the middle of this workshop and did one piece of the value study. I did function analysis. And I said, all right, guys, I don't really care about who owns what. Here's what I want to ask you. What are all of the functions of a fully, successfully functioning border facility? And that's what we did. We just brainstormed every function. And then we went back and I said, now tell me what is currently in the project that you are looking to do. And lo and behold, 5 things were missing, which we realized all of a sudden. I said, what is this telling you? If your goal is that facility. And so it was an opportunity to get them out of the, this is mine, this is yours, not doing yours, mentality, and get them focused on what is the definition of success. And so it was really important. And that was all based on the thinking differently about function and function-based delivery. And I know Rick said, and for those of us who lead studies, he's like, well, we're just doing it internally. They're not doing full-blown workshops internally. They're forcing the discussion and the thought process of what must this project do? How must it function in order for them to make better decisions? And there's a lot of really small projects that those informal discussions and opportunities don't really require a full workshop, but looking at that as an opportunity in an informal way, when it comes to the big ones and they realize, ooh, this is probably would be really good to do a full-blown workshop, they're going to be more apt to embrace that than if they're not using it as a way of thinking and as a tool. So, and the only other thing that I'd like to say is we just need to remember that we need to practice, practice, practice. It doesn't come easily. So with that, Rick, thank you very much for
My pleasure.
joining me on this and from an agency's perspective. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Ms. Katie.